I'm Joe. I've been in manufacturing for over a decade, and I've overseen the production of millions of products all over the world, and this is Community Questions.
Wong Winslow says, if it is anti-wrinkle, what is it treated with, and what is the chemical effect of wearing and washing long term?
All right, so let's talk about wrinkling first. When it comes to wrinkling, you're typically going to see a lot more wrinkling in natural fibers than you will with synthetic fibers, because synthetic fibers have something called elastic deformation, where even if you're bending it, it will naturally try to return to its kind of set state. When it comes to natural fibers, what happens is they're all typically made up of what are called staple fibers. And these are short length fibers that are twisted together and are basically held together with friction in the yarn. So when you bend and you crease natural fiber fabric, these little staple fibers are now actually shifting and now being held now in this new creased state based off of the friction. So when you are trying to apply chemical treatments to the fabric to make it anti-wrinkle resistant, typically it's going to be a resin that they will apply in this kind of giant football field long machine called the stenter. And this is where they apply a lot of the fabric treatments and then they heat set it. But what it does is it kind of cross-links these fibers to prevent that shifting of those fibers to make it a little bit more wrinkle resistant. It typically will have a lot of washability, but of course, washing over time will kind of remove any chemical treatments that you are putting on fabrics. But what will absolutely remove it over time is heat treating those fibers. So if you're ironing anything that is wrinkle resistant, a lot of times you are going to be kind of degrading the performance of that wrinkle resistance over time.
Chris Littman says, I feel like you did a video a while back on what to look for in shirt necks and what causes them to wrinkle up. Can you explain that, please?
Yeah, so when it comes to shirt necks, you're gonna have what's called binding around the neck or neck ribbing. And what it is fabric that has higher stretch than the base fabric, so you can get it over your head ultimately, which is gonna be larger than your neck. You can have this in various forms. You can have it in a 1x1 rib, a 2x2 rib. Sometimes they'll use self fabric. But what happens a lot of times, especially in cheaper shirts, where the manufacturer or brand hasn't pre-shrunk the shirt itself, you're gonna have different shrinkage rates on the neck ribbing than you will on the base fabric. So when the shirt shrinks up and the ribbing shrinks up, a lot of times that's when you'll get all these waves because of that different shrinkage rate. And also sometimes when factories are sewing them onto the garment itself, they're not gonna be sometimes keeping like constant tension, and that's gonna cause the serge seam to be wavy as well. But one thing you can do in stores to look out for this and kind of know that it will happen over time is if you feel the neck ribbing and you just give it a little tug, you'll have to feel a few different shirts ultimately over time. But if you give it a little tug and it's super loose, that's a pretty good sign that it has not been pre-shrunk and it will cause that waviness over time.
Vipool Seth says, how much percentage of fluctuation in GSM is acceptable while making fabric for hoodies?
Okay, so what GSM is, for those who don't know, stands for grams per square meter. And ultimately, that is just one way to measure the weight of the fabric that you're getting. So when it comes to hoodies and stuff that are going to be terry and fleece, I've seen 10% as a pretty strong industry standard for variance in terms of weight. That means if you're getting a 400 GSM hoodie, sometimes I've seen it go down to 360 and I've seen it go up more. Obviously, the higher quality product you're making and the better the mill and dye house is, you can tighten that tolerance up. You can bring it down to 5% I've seen for a lot of natural fibers. But at the end of the day, you pretty much want to be as close to what you're ultimately speccing, because I've seen and I've heard people say that, let's say you order 400 GSM hoodie and you get 450, that you're just getting, free game, you're getting more bang for your buck. But ultimately what you're getting is a product that is out of spec, is out of tolerance, and it's not what you paid for. So that is one thing you just always need to make sure that you do, is check the GSM with the bulk fabric to make sure you're ultimately getting what you paid for and what you ultimately designed too. Because if you get something that's heavier or you get something that's lighter, it's not going to drape the same as your original prototype and sample. So try to get that tolerance as tight as possible. I like to get 5% tolerance, but I've seen even tighter tolerances in terms of a lot of bulk fabrics, depending on the brand and the mill at the end of the day.
Yundaz says, What are some of the questions to ask to not let things like this happen to starting brand owners?
Okay, so I think he's talking about a video where I uncovered a show factory. So one thing a lot of starting brand owners can do, and one thing we always do for every new factory that we're going to work with, is we ask for a proof of life video. So what does that mean? It means that whoever you're contacting at the factory, ask them, hey, pick up your phone, say, hi, Joe, that's your name. I'm blah, blah, blah. Today is this date, and ask them to do a video tour of the factory. If they are a legit factory and not a trading company, then it's not an issue at the end of the day for them to just get up from their desk and walk around the factory and show you all of the different parts and components and the different floors of their factory. If they're a trading company or they are a show factory, then oftentimes they're going to be quite reluctant to do a video like this, or they're going to send you an old video. And oftentimes when I get those old videos or they're reluctant to do videos, that's a very clear sign that they're not who they say they are.
At Date4738 says, this was great. There seems to be frequent innovation in the fabrics used, but is there much innovation on the construction side of manufacturing garments?
So when it comes to construction of garments, there's going to be machines that have obviously been around for decades, if not longer, like single needle sewing machines, overlock sergers, etc. But oftentimes when you get a new fabric and people want to utilize it in a new category or in a way that's never been done before, oftentimes new construction techniques are brought in. Like when you get a lot of waterproof fabric, so water resistant fabric, sure you can sew it, but you're puncturing the fabric at that point. So a new innovation was taping and bonding seams that allowed you to have a continuous waterproof or water resistant shell. Even when you look at sewing machines like flat lock machines, these machines have been around for a long time, but the popularity of athletic wear has brought more of these machines onto the market, which allows people to play around with them and utilize them in ways that typically weren't originally thought to be the use cases of them. I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of innovation happening when you have so many different people working in the industry to try to do something different and move things forward.
If you guys want to see more behind the scenes secrets on the fashion industry and learn more about how to create products and brands, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and check out these videos.